Okay, it's 5:30. We will call this meeting of the TIF Advisory Committee to order. The first item to inform the public about is the location of the Open Meetings Act, posted in the northwest corner of the council chambers and accessible to members of the public. We'll start off with roll call, please, Kylie.
Cox, Einsbar, Johnson.
Here.
Caney.
Here.
Lindsay.
Here.
McKenzie.
Here.
Shukai.
Here.
Sehi.
Here.
Steiner. Waite.
Yep.
Wyrick.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Okay, and now I would entertain a motion to approve the January 28th TIF Committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, and with that, we'll turn it over to Troy to work on the housing study review.
So we had asked Tim Keelan with Hannah Keelan, who did the housing study for us, and I think that that's not been fully reviewed by the city or whatever, but it was part of our committee, so we asked for that information. You all have received that, and so we asked him to be involved in this by his conference, and we're going to do that, and we will introduce, or I'll bring in Tim Keelan for questions on the housing study. If you have anything, just speak up. You'll probably want to talk into the mic too, because we need to make sure he hears us as well. So when it's your turn. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Hi. Maybe if you can give the overall group, TIF Council group, just kind of an overall bird's eye view of what is a housing study, I guess. We obviously were looking at it, but what kind of things you guys factor and do and purpose, I guess.
All right, real good. Thanks for having me on. I'd be more than happy to explain that, and you could call me back another time. I'd be more than happy to chat with you about this. But housing studies, I'm a community planner, community research planner, do community and county research type of projects, and been in business over 40 years. So I've done around 500 different housing studies for different types of things. We have housing studies which are project specific, like a developer will call and say, I want to put 100 units of senior housing in Norfolk, for example, and they'll ask me to see what kind of absorption rate a project would be. And that's a lot of times those project specific studies are done for lenders as well as developers to see where a project is. And then we have sort of general housing studies that we do for communities and counties. And what the major mission there is to get a lot of good qualitative feedback from the citizens in regards to what kind of housing they would like to see in their community or a county, and make a determination of what that target demand would be. And we look at 5-year periods because of the economics of housing changes quite a bit. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. And so we kind of have to plan for the current situation economically for housing, as well as make a projection into 5 years out. So we do 5-year projections on our housing studies. Sometimes we'll do 10 if asked to do that. But anyway, so the housing study, the primary objective is to come up with an estimated target demand, both owner and renter, taking a look at different housing components within a particular community. And from that, what we do is we prepare like a housing action plan, which identifies a little bit more specifically kind of a roadmap or a guide for a community to follow. Now, in the case of Norfolk, we did this study for the Housing Authority. Rita had a really good housing committee that we worked with and gave us a lot of feedback in that process. But we want to make sure that folks like, other groups, like the TIF Advisory Group, your planning director, a number of groups, stakeholders, we call them stakeholders in the community, get a copy of this housing study and use it, and because it really helps to promote housing in communities. We get calls from developers and they say, does such and such community do you have a housing study for that community? And if we do, we share that with them. So it's a good way to attract developers to your community. Norfolk has done an outstanding job of putting housing in the ground. And this is about our third study, maybe fourth study that we've done for Norfolk. We did this on a county-wide basis where we looked at all the other communities, but the primary community was Norfolk, as well as Madison down the road from you there too, which has a lot of potential to put some good housing in because they've got some pretty nice industries down there. So that's kind of the mission of the housing study, is to prepare a document that identifies an estimated target demand for different housing types. And I forgot to ask you, do you have a copy of the study there by any chance?
We have a copy on the video screen, and then several of us have print copies as well, so yeah.
Excellent.
So if there's so if you're gonna call attention to specific, if you're gonna call attention to specific pages too, we can get that pulled up in front of everybody, so.
All right. I want you to go to the appendix 1, and pull up page, what do I got here? I got page 24. I want you to pull up page 24, which is, it's where all the statistics and a lot of things are. But anyway, pull up page 24 in appendix 1.
211. So on the bottom of your page, it looks like it's 211. Okay.
24 or page 211?
Well,
24, page 24 in the appendix.
Page 24 of the appendix?
Yes,
oh,
page 24. Go to the appendix.
appendix in the back.
1. Yeah, appendix in the back, appendix 1, page 24. This gets into all the tables and stuff. It's the easiest, so we just kind of go there.
So appendix 1 has the survey comments first, correct?
That's correct. Just keep rolling through.
Okay.
9 of 24. What do I have on page 24?
We're not finding a page 24 marked on the bottom of the study anywhere.
She looks like she has one.
Yeah, so we have the screen in front of you.
They have it on the
Is that
screen.
what so he's referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. We have table 1, we got it on the screen anyway, in front of us.
Okay, you want to roll down to table 15A.
Yeah, 15A.
You've got table 1 up there. That's the population.
Got it.
But you want to roll down to table 15A. You got it?
Yeah,
We got it.
All right, so this is, I'm just kind of cutting to the chase here with you a little bit. So this is estimated housing unit target demand. And I'll explain to you how I arrive at this. But anyway, we have the countywide, Madison County, and then we got all the towns there, and we got Norfolk there. And you can see under Norfolk that we have two numbers under owner, 363 and 387, and one of them represents a median population projection over the next 5 years. That's how many owner units you would need. The ones in yellow represent what we call the population projection associated with a community growth initiative. If you started to get more businesses in and so on and so forth. I won't go into detail on that. Anyway, we have two different demands there. And you can see that we have for Norfolk 363 and the 387, and then under rental we have 242 and 270. And then there's your grand totals of 605, 657. And over to the right-hand side, you can see what the estimated redevelopment or the estimated development costs would be associated with that, 202 million, so on and so forth there. You can see that. But what I want to talk about is below where it says housing unit target demand based on. Okay, these are different components that I look at. So we try to kind of catch everything that's related to housing or shelter in a community. First, we look at the expected new households over the next 5 years, and then we're required to take a look at cost-burdened households. These are households that are paying over 30 to 35% for their P&I and or their rent. The P&I of their owner, and then rent if they're renters. So we look at cost-burdened households, and we pull out a certain percentage there. Then we take a look at replacement of occupied, deteriorated, or dilapidated housing units First and foremost, looking at those that are occupied and try to make a correction there over the next 5 years and sort of lower that cost. And then we have an owner and renter housing vacancy deficiency. You have a pretty small vacancy in the community, estimated vacancy of housing. You need to operate, if you want a good, healthy housing environment, you need to operate at 6 or 7% vacancy as it relates to both owner and renter units. I mean, that's just good business. Nobody likes to own a vacant rental unit, but you just need to have a certain amount of different price points or price products available that are vacant. And then we also take a look at securing a certain percentage of the commuter labor force that's coming in Norfolk. Then we have the pent-up housing demand. That's the housing demand for folks that currently live in the community who may want something different over the next 5 years. And then we have to target special populations, persons with special needs and things of that nature. And then we also have in here, we have the student off-campus housing that we take a look at for communities which have community colleges and universities and things. And then lastly, we have what we call seasonal housing demand, which is, including short-term rentals, housing units, as well as vacation homes, Airbnbs, and that sort of thing. So anyway, I take a look at each one of these components, and I come up with and there's some overlapping in here, okay? And I take that in consideration when I come up with a single big number as it relates to like Norfolk or any community. And then what I do is I apply a 5-year housing development capacity based upon a variety of amenities such as financing available, land that's shovel-ready, so on and so forth. And I apply that. Now, a town like Norfolk really has a pretty good housing vacancy capacity, a housing development capacity, probably 65% of the big number that I come up with. You're probably just as high as about anybody I know, with the exception of maybe Lincoln and Omaha and up in Douglas County and Sarpy County and some of those communities. But outside of the metro areas, you have as good a housing development capacity as any one of the other communities in the state. So that's how I arrive at that demand. And I crunch numbers, and I come up with what I think is a reasonable number, and I think is a conservative number. So if we go back up on top and look at Norfolk, that's the numbers that we recommended in the housing study that be targeted over the next 5 years. And so any questions on that table at all? And then we've got some information there about workforce housing and so on and so forth, what percentage or what number of workforce housing. Any questions about that table? Because that's kind of the table, so to speak. I think I have a separate one for Norfolk, which is, here it is. It's down on it's a couple pages further on, like page 26. That's a separate one for Norfolk.
Tim, this is Jim McKenzie. I do have a question, and I was trying to reconcile your housing demand recommendation versus the population growth. I noticed the population growth for Madison County is projected to be 153 people, and yet our targeted demand for the county as a whole is 743 to 819 new units. So I was having a hard time reconciling how the units can be so much higher than the actual number of people that the community will grow.
Well, first of all, you're going to be building housing for people. You need to be building some housing for people that currently live there. Special populations, people who want to change housing types, things of that nature. But you also have a vacancy deficiency. I'm going to take a look here and see if I can find your vacancy number. Kind of pounding through here real quick. Let's see here.
I think Norfolk was 8%, and that's another question I had. You adjusted it down to a 2.4%, and I couldn't find anything in the housing study which would indicate the process that you use to reduce the percentage down that much. It seems like it takes a lot of the vacancy and says it's not available, and I didn't understand where that came from.
Well, we have to look at a lot of different numbers as it relates to vacant units. We have to honor like census information, which has a plus or minus 9 to 13% either way, that sort of thing. We have to take a look at that. But we also talk to leadership in the community. We get out in the community, did some field work in Norfolk too, and trying to get some reasonable assumptions of what that vacancy rate is. And what we do on the adjustment is we adjust the vacancy rate based upon availability. You'd be surprised how many vacant units are in any community that are just simply not available. They're vacant, they're not available, or they're not in. They don't meet code, for example, and things like that. So we do an adjustment of that, and there's a narrative in the text that talks about that. So we do that, what we call an adjusted vacancy rate, and Norfolk's sitting there, easily around 2.5% vacancy of things that are available, that are marketable and meet codes and so on and so forth. So we have to make that assumption. And when we get down and really, start really carving on the bone, so to speak, we get down there about 2.5% vacancy, which is too low, to be quite honest with you. So you have to take a look at that. So that, in answer to your question, then we go back to that table. Here it is, back to the table on page 24, and we look at these different things in here. We do anticipate, which is not in the population, of securing a certain current commuter labor force. If there's an initiative in the community to kind of capture some of them people that are coming into work, there has to be initiatives associated with doing any kind of housing. In other words, some kind of plan of action. And that's where you get all your stakeholders together and decide who's going to take a bite out of these. Who's going to take a bite out of special populations? Who's going to take a bite out of looking at the labor force and so on and so forth?
Tim, can I just follow up a little bit on that, the vacancy rate again, the adjusted vacancy rate before we go on further? So, that makes a huge difference in the housing demand. And so without quantifiable process to say this is why we adjusted it down, it's a challenge to accept that on face value without some quantification as to how we came about that.
Well, I just described to you, like we're out there looking at counting units that are vacant. We talk to some stakeholders that give us an idea where vacant units are and so on and so forth. I mean, we can't go door to door and see who's answering. You know what I'm saying? It's like we make some reasonable assumption of how many vacant units there are. Plus, we have to use a lot of those numbers come out of census, which have we have to honor the census in all of our research. And so a lot of those numbers come out of census, and some of those numbers are fairly large. I doubt that you really have, a 10% vacancy across the board there, or whatever that was. Look up here again.
I'm going to jump in here.
You have
Tim,
a vacancy rate of 8%, the way it sets right now, which is not too high. And then when you start subtracting units which meet the qualifications of marketable, then you're going to have to make an adjustment on that vacancy rate. I can show you the numbers. I crunch numbers all over the place here on pieces of paper, but it's like it all comes down to making a reasonable assumption, of what's there, and you crunch numbers as far as you can go.
Tim, this is Scott Williams, and I talked to an owner of a large number of rental apartments today, and last fall she indicated that their occupancy was running about vacancy was running about 10%, and right now their vacancy is down to about 5%. So that's good for them, I guess. And she called another, and her units are probably old. I would gauge as older. They're built in the 1970s to the 1990s. And then she called another development that is new units, probably within 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And they indicated that their vacancy right now is sitting at about 12% on new apartment houses. So, I get you have to make some assumptions on census and things. And I guess the number crunching is what it is, but it just seems like 2% or 2.3% might be a little low actually for our town based on the landlords that that I've dealt with anyway, so just throwing that out there.
That's fine. I mean, you know, we have a list of comparables that we take a look at, and it's like both affordable, which are units which are built with, you know, subsidized dollars, like section, you know, like low-income housing tax credits, home funds, CDBG funds, things like that, which have, you know, have those kind of dollars in there, which require, you know, income qualification, that sort of deal. And then also market rate units, which don't require any kind of qualification for that. I could tell you that I've never known a landlord that didn't have a vacancy. You know, I mean, it's just kind of the nature of, you know, what kind of information they have and what's their management style and so on and so forth, you know.
So Tim, this is Jim McKenzie. One more quick question on the vacancy. So there's currently being constructed in Norfolk right now an apartment development of 175 new units. Is that reflected, or would that solve part of those ones that you're calling the demand out for right now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know that Keith in my office looked at that, but, you know, when they get online, those units get online, that'll be very helpful.
So that will reduce the demand by 175 units then?
Could very easily. All depends who those units are, you know, what kind of consumer group they're addressing, because, you know, you need elderly housing, you need student housing, off-campus housing, you need just general, you know, family housing for rentals, individuals, younger people, so on and so forth, that type of thing. But I look at projects like that as being good projects, but if they would come to me before they did that, I would probably say, you might want to consider doing this amount of units at this point and make sure that you hit these type of price points that we have listed. There's another table in here that deals with price points and things, you know. But what we find, Jim, with like the developers of apartments is like, you know, that's their style. This is what we do. You know, are you interested or not? You know, that kind of thing. That's how they kind of come into communities. And it's hard to turn them down. And they do it in large numbers. It's the economics of it. Most private developers don't do anything less than about 90 units, okay? So, but you need some, you know, you need some more smaller scale rentals as well as it relates to like townhomes and things of that nature too. So you can't forget that. The other thing that we can't stop is new housing replaces old housing. I mean, that's an issue. It's just the nature of things, you know. I mean, I myself used to have a couple older rental houses, and you could rent real easily 20 years ago, and then it got so you couldn't because other people built newer things, and younger people wanted newer housing, and I get that, and so, you know, I sell them and let somebody own them then. You know, it's that kind of thing. So some of the ma and pa type property owners sometimes, you know, take a hit when there's big projects like that. So you got to take that kind of in consideration, that you just kind of don't squeeze them out of the market. But at the same token, people, you know, you have to meet the demand of what people want. You know, they want newer stuff, you know, and modern things. And, you know, when I went to college, it's like, I don't even want to tell you, you know, some of the places I had to live, but it's like, you know, like basement apartments and things of that nature. But today, there's housing being built for students that's brand new stuff. And so it's changing. You know, times change, the economics change, and people's, you know, their preference in housing changes too. So you got to kind of keep an eye on what comes into the community. And like I said, if I was 175 units, you know, can you do that in 2 phases to make sure it works? You know, we don't want to squeeze other people out that want to do things at a smaller scale too. It's hard to do that, but it's something that you got to kind of keep an eye on.
Tim, Troy Wyrick here. One of the things, I think this is good info, but the difference from the community strategy probably be from a 3% vacancy versus a 8% vacancy is it's like light years apart, the strategy difference and stuff. So that's why I appreciate you giving info on this, but I think that number is deserved the extra time for sure. One thing
Well,
else.
what do you think I could ask you what you think that number is. I do that sometimes. I just say, what do you think that vacancy number is?
I think the vacancy, when it comes to R1 housing affordable, I mean, uneducated, but my daughter's buying a house right now, and in the housing market and selling one is low. The 250, her house sold in 3 days and 250K.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that, and she's looking to buy something at 350K in the 350 range, and there's not a lot available. She did make an offer and they agreed, but it was kind of spooky because she sold her house and then had hoped to find something. But so I think at that lower price point, I think it is low. I don't know. I have no idea when it comes to apartments. I don't know, but. So I think it's low. I think we do need, especially affordable housing in the community. One thing I notice later on in it is 40. That's a little bit of a concern to me, maybe as an outsider, and that 40% of our units are rentals. 40% of our residents live in rentals, so 60% home ownership. Like Tilden is like 17%, which obviously it's different. There's no college and stuff in Tilden. You would expect that to be lower, but 40% seems unhealthy, or maybe not unhealthy, but it doesn't seem ideal in a community of our size. I think you want home ownership to keep young people invested in your community and help grow workforce. When you're renting, it's pretty easy to leave, I guess. I don't know your thoughts on that number.
Well, I feel pretty comfortable with the 40%. There's other communities that have higher percentages. Some are like 50-50, that type of thing. Some are lower, at 25. I was trying to remember what Hastings is. We did theirs, but I think they were up close to like 39 or 40%, around there too. But we have a generation now too that doesn't have any qualms at all about renting until they're like 30 years old, that type of thing. So rental housing has become much popular. It allows them to be a little bit more mobile. Folks are getting married a little bit later in life, and instead of 22, it's more like, you can see like 32s and stuff. So rental housing is popular. It's just an easy way to live, without a lot of hassle. And so, but I agree with you, then that changes, and then you need affordable owner stuff. So that's the kind of thing you need to keep an eye on. But yeah, I see your point. Definitely. But
just a thought on that. Yeah, I mean, if you're buying, I have kids that are that age, and I've employed hundreds of young people over the years from 20s and 30s out of college. Sometimes I agree with you on 20-year-olds, but sometimes I think 30-year-olds don't buy houses because they can't afford to. Because if you're spending $1,500 a month for rental, it doesn't allow you to save, necessarily to get in the game. I have found that over time. I don't know that there's anything wrong. I just feel like that maybe that number, even 2-3% lower than that, is an improvement to help, your community grow. So just in my
good
thoughts.
Point. That's a good point.
Tim, this is Clint Shuckeye, and looking at some of the data that was included in there, I just wondered, to what extent, if at all, does the economic data that you find in the community reflect itself in the number of housing units you're calling for and the like? Are they totally separate, or is there some interface between those?
Well, when we do our demographic analysis, we take a look at, population, income, and economics, and we also have information as it relates to, new jobs and things like that. We don't put a lot of that stuff in there, but, we try to get a strong feel what the availability of dollars is, for people to rent or to own either one, So we look at the economics of things and try to make an assumption then, of what what reasonable price points would be for different type of housing. So, yeah, we look at that and, make a determination of primarily what the price points are. there's a price point table in here for Norfolk. I'm trying to find it here real quick. Let's go down to like, I think it's like page 32. I think this is the one I want to show you.
Is that in the same appendix we have been working in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, it's like table 20B. And, yeah, and so what we try to do here is, based upon the current income, which income is one of the primary economic factors associated with being able to afford housing, what we have there is we have owner units, we have elderly families, special populations. That's about how far we break it down. Elderly being 55 plus. We have both owner and renter there. And we have the number of units, and we have it both for the median population and the CGI population estimate. And you can see in the center point there, we have the price points that we, would suggest that you stay within that price point to make these products affordable in the community. And then we also do it for rental below. So these are some of the rental type of, like for rental it could be, to be affordable to a certain population base has to be closer to $665, whereas in a market rate it's more than $1,250. It could be higher than that, but we're suggesting that based upon your estimated target number, we try to be conservative on this. We don't want to blow the numbers out the window, but here are some price points that are considered in that. And these price points are based upon, what the cost of housing is in the community, what the cost of housing should be based upon income, and so on and so forth. So this is just a guide to kind of take a look at for consideration. So I don't know what these units are going to rent for at $175. We've probably got some information. I don't have it on in front, but what those units are going to rent for, like 2-bedroom units. I'd be curious if you know what that number is, but they're probably not going to be cheap. They're going to be up around the 1200s and so on and so forth.
And just as a follow-up to that, when you look at these, like in this table 20B, we talk about the demand and the price points. Is there anything that compares whether the income is there to do this? I mean,
yeah, of course, yeah. Because we take a look at income, and there's income projections and things of that nature in the study.
And to that end, I noted that of the people that answered the survey, and I don't know to what extent, if at all, again, that has any relevancy.
Oh yeah.
But the comment is made in the document that a majority of the participants had household income of less than $149,000, and when you look at the data itself, it's really more like 80% of the people that responded had income of less than that. And I wondered, if at all, if that moved that at all. I also noted that the income profile in section 2 on page 2.8, there's numbers in there. I wondered where you got your numbers, because they're not Census Bureau numbers. You've got surveys at 2019 to 2023 with Madison County at 74,000, and yet the Census Bureau says that Madison County is 63,000. So when those numbers are off by some 15 or 20%, does that affect the affordability of the housing, and what you're aiming for is really the question. So I know there's a number of questions there.
There's several questions there.
What's
what
that?
table were you looking at? Table 2?
I'm looking,
It's on page 2-8 of the study, and it talks about the median income in Madison County as per the 2019-2023 American Community Survey is $74,985.
Oh, Yeah, I'm having a hard time tracking with you here. I'm back in the appendix.
This wouldn't be,
Okay.
this isn't the main part, in the main part under, 2.8, page 2.8, section 2, page 8, I assume. Clear up.
Yeah, it's under,
Like 25 pages into the report.
It's under the income profile of the section 2.
income profile.
You're getting there. There we go.
And I'm not, I don't pretend to understand the American Community Survey. When I looked it up, it said, for better numbers, look to the U.S. Census Bureau. When I go to the U.S. Census Bureau, it's got numbers for Madison County that are 20, close to 28, 15 to 20% less.
Yeah, we go with American Community Survey. You got to use a community survey. I mean, it's a better estimate. I can tell you that right now. They're probably sending you back to like 2020 or something like that. But
Well,
there again, we kind of have to honor these numbers. If we don't, and the community applies for dollars like home funds, CDBG funds, things of that nature, from different funding sources at the state level, like NIFA, Department of Economic Development, they're going to make sure they want to see that you use the data that's most current.
yeah, well,
And so
what
we
the
have
U.S.
23
Census Bureau says is it says this is median household income in 2024 dollars. $63,000.
I don't. Yeah, well, I can look. I don't know where you're getting that, but it's like.
Well, I'm getting it from the U.S. Census Bureau. It's the United States Census Bureau, quick facts, they're out there for everybody. And when I searched American Community Survey, it says, if you want better information, go to the United States Census Bureau, quick facts.
All right, so you're saying that it's not 74, but it's like 68 or what? What are you
No,
saying?
I'm saying it's 63 according to the U.S. Census Bureau.
All right, well, okay.
So, I mean, there's quite a bit of difference, and I don't know to what extent that goes into the recommendation at the end of the survey.
Well, let's walk down there for a second. Let's go back to the appendix. Ooh. Let's see. I'm going to put you at a page here in a second, back in the appendix.
He hasn't said yet. He's hunting.
I'm looking for a table.
Is it table 5 in the appendix 2 by chance what you're looking for on page 9? There's an income, it's a income group, all households 65 and over, and then renter households.
No, I'm looking at page 27 in
Okay.
the appendix.
We've got it up in front of us.
On table 16.
Yep.
All right, this is current HUD numbers for income for Madison County, all right? And you can see it at 30% AMI, 50%, 60, 100% AMI, 100% four-person household, they have it $93,000, okay? That's in Madison County. This is the most current data. And what we do when we do our price points is we make a calculation out of that, and I'll roll you down to, let's get a price point table here again. And the reason we do those in different income categories like 30% and 50% is because that's different funding levels. but it also has 100 and 125% in there, and that's the highest they go on that. But I'm going back to that price point table, which is page 20B, and you can see the calculation that we use to make a determination of what those price points are. So that table that we used, that I just mentioned, that HUD table, that's the table we use to make any kind of calculations associated with price points, and we use 3-person households to do that. We could use different size households, but that's what we use. I mean, we didn't want to complicate it. But that's how we do the calculation associated with that to come up with what we think is a reasonable range of price points for both owner and renter units. So, anyway.
3 makes sense because that's probably about the number of people in the average household.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know. I use 3 on this one. Sometimes I use less than that. Most communities I'll use less, like 2.5 or something like that. But we have to. I appreciate your input, but it's like what it kind of comes down here is what the estimated demand is, target demand, and then taking a look at the price points here and things of that nature. I want to show you one other table here before we bust out of here. I'm sorry about that, but it's back in the text itself. It's page. I wrote it down here. Where's it at, Tim? Page 314. This is way back in the text, 314.
Okay, got it.
So we have the estimated target demand, we have the price points, things of that nature, and then to give this a little bit more of a boost without getting too out there, out on the branch too far, we put together like an action plan. And so what's important here is that we're proposing, single family, patio, townhomes, owner housing units. We're looking at 3-bedroom plus. I didn't even look at the 2s. I looked at 3 or plus bedrooms. 230 owner units, and there's an estimated cost. And then we have to make some kind of assumption as it relates to what kind of cost subsidy would be needed. And that's ranging from helping out first-time home buyers all the way to persons that want to build up in the $600,000, $700,000 range too. So I think the key here in the action plan is we have the family, we have the family rental, we have the elderly owner, we have the elderly rental, and special needs and moderate to substantial rehab. We kind of list the programs that need initiatives or need to be guided in the community by the stakeholders. So where you come in, tax income and financing, is to assist with that subsidy percentage and for that subsidy number there. And, in that first one there, where it's 35% or 31 million, you could make a reasonable assumption, tax income financing could help out on, maybe 20%, 25% of that. If you're looking to see how tax income and financing can help out on these projects. I've been involved with enough TIF projects that, you can get up there to 20% of that subsidy that's needed, or 30% of that subsidy that's needed using tax income and financing. So the reason we do this action plan is to kind of break it out and make it a little simpler to follow and things. So I wanted to make sure I showed you that table.
Tim, this is Jim McKenzie. Just a couple other quick questions for you before you take off real quick. Your CGI, your County Growth Initiative, assumes 275 new jobs and a 10% commuter capture. Do your numbers of units, are your numbers factoring in that CGI?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. And so the 275 new jobs seems, we would love to have that happen, obviously. But without that, there's probably not the jobs to support the housing units? I guess that's kind of a question or statement, I'm not sure which. And then just to follow up, one more quick question. The land requirements in the study show for Norfolk, 524 to 565 acres for 605 to 657 units. That seems very high. I'm just kind of curious how you came up with that land requirement.
Well, we do a calculation for land requirements, so we take that times 3. So in a comprehensive plan, you just don't plan for the exact number of residential land area you need. You have to take in consideration any kind of, opportunity for choice or opportunity to purchase land. So we say that you need to have 3 times of that available. You can see that little 3X up there in that. I'm looking at table 21, you probably are too, but it's like, you can see that X3 in there times 3. So that's what we do. You can take it times 2 if you wanted to. I was going to chat with your city planner about that, or I think Rita was going to talk to her about that a little bit. And, I can just give you you divide it by 3 and you got the base number of what you need. And then, but, comprehensive plans, I find we do comprehensive plans, we find a lot of times there's just not enough land allocated in different areas, for developers to be able to secure land at a marketable, reasonable cost. They don't want to be, restricted to just one particular area, to build, so to speak. So that's why we do that.
Okay.
Does that make any sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I was kind of looking at it from the standpoint of a community investment. So if the community has to invest in running infrastructure to land to make it developable, it's a lot more costly to have 500-plus acres of land developable than it is to have 125 acres developable. So just kind of curious where you came up with that.
Well, we take the available, we calculate the estimated required land, on a one-to-one basis, and then we take it times 3 because, so many communities we run into, it's like, the land that they've got allocated in their comprehensive plan for residential. This is without going through a whole bunch of changes to the comp plan and zoning and all that kind of stuff, because that can slow down development. So you want a comprehensive plan that reaches out there and identifies residential areas maybe threefold to provide the opportunity for choice, for developers, and the opportunity to competitively buy that property and so on and so forth. So, that's why we do that. And that seems to work pretty well.
Thank you.
Rita, did you have input?
Is Rita there?
Yeah,
Hi,
she
Rita.
is.
I didn't know you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do I have to?
Yeah, push that. There you go.
Okay. Well, Val looked up for me on her computer because I couldn't find it on my phone, but we have to go with what's called HUD data sets at the housing agency, whether it's Section 8 program or tax credits, there's home funds, there's all different programs that we work with, but Val found the home income limits, and for Madison County, a family of 4, it's at 80% income level is $74,400. Now that's HUD the government doing a study every year. I don't know how they come to all this, but they tell us what our area is for every county across the United States. And each year they tell us for all the different programs, this is what you can use. They do the same thing for rents. They call them fair market rents. It's on that data sets. At times it's behind, and then at times it catches up. It just depends. I know down in Fremont, it was behind for about 5 years, and then it caught up to what the rents actually were. So that's just FYI, that's family of 4 is 74,400 on the home program.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
I want to go back to that land issue just a little bit, because I work with community redevelopment authorities. You know what they are. You guys, what you have in Norfolk is you have a community development agency with the city council, and then they've decided to have a TIF advisory committee. But which we have, I work with CRAs that do area-wide TIF projects, like they have a redevelopment area, and they look at it area-wide, and they collect the increment off that entire area, which gives them dollars to do things like buy land and then make that land available to developers. So there are communities which use their tax increment financing to, be on the proactive side, so to speak, to secure land. And then, like I said, you put out RFPs, requests for proposals to developers, and it just works better that way. I mean, it kind of comes down to if you don't have land, it's hard to say how to use it. So the CRA, some of the, like Hastings, Waverly does this. It's like, they just buy the land. CRA buys the land with increment, with the taxes that they get off the tax increment financing. So I don't know. You've obviously, I'm going to guess you probably never did that because your city council is a CDA and you're just set there as you're there as a TIF advisory committee, which I know one other that way. I think it's York that has that. But anyway, does that work for you to be in an advisory committee and just kind of say whether a project meets a but for or not, and that's it? And is that how you do it, or what?
Well, as an advisory committee, we're really here just to kind of set some good thoughts and outlines. We really don't see that stuff. We're not reviewing individual projects. We're a short-term committee that will make a recommendation and then we'll disband, I guess. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna. Yeah, the council will develop the policies and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Anything else?
Nope. All right. Well, thanks, Tim. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks,
I
Tim.
appreciate your input. And I'm going to check on a couple of things too, what I heard tonight. So it's like, and bye-bye, Rita. Nice to hear that you're there. I didn't know you were there. So, okay.
Thanks. All right.
All right.
See ya.
Talk
Thanks.
to you guys later.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye. With him off about any other input or anything, any observation?
We were visiting down here when he brought up the table that's still there.
Yeah.
If you look at that top one, it's saying that 230 units, going to cost $90 million. It says there needs to be an estimated cost subsidy of 35% of that. It's darn scary. If you take that $31 million subsidy number, divide it by 230, comes up to $138,000 a unit.
Yeah.
Big number.
Yeah, I had a number of questions on the housing survey, and I think he answered a lot of them. I'm not sure. I think there's some concern about the projection of the number of units based upon a CGI, which doesn't have any real strong basis in it other than a guess. And then it's also based upon a vacancy rate, which is adjusted, which we don't really quite understand the adjustment. But I think overall, when I read the housing study, the thing that just kept coming back and back and back and back is what the community is really looking for is houses that are truly affordable to people that want to buy something that's under $300,000. And that, to me, was the overarching thing that I kept coming out of that housing study was, we need to really focus on truly more affordable housing. And I know that affordable number gets thrown out all the time, but I think that's where we need to focus.
We'll advance to the outline. So Jim, I kind of aided, but Jim did some of the entry into this. Do you want to tell how this summary kind of came to be?
Sure. I took the transcript from the last meeting, whenever you recorded on on YouTube, the transcript's available, so and the transcript isn't always perfect. I just took the transcript and I fed it into AI and I said, review this and give me a list of ideas that committee members came up with, and this is what it spit out. And I didn't have any bias or input into it other than tell it that and tell it to come up with this. And so that's what it came up with, and so I thought, I tried to do some other saying, okay, turn this into a policy or flesh this out a little bit more, and every time I did that, it changed the meaning or what was discussed, I felt. So I thought, I'm just gonna go back to the original, and Troy and I talked about it, and I said, this seems to more reflect what the actual conversations were, what the ideas were that were brought up by the committee members, so I thought that was a good starting point.
Does anybody of this, does this represent your thoughts? I mean, not necessarily you agree on everything, but was there anything that was brought up that's not reflected in this, outside of the one thing that I know isn't, is because I think we talked to it earlier in the meeting, but is the assessor having the availability to go through new builds prior to closing? That I don't think is reflected in here.
It seems to me that's a pretty good reflection of the meeting, with the exception of the assessor getting involved. I think that's pretty key to get those valuations up sooner rather than later.
The one thing
And I don't agree with all of them, but, you know,
That was a reflection.
it's true, it's a true reflection of what the meeting was, so I'll go there.
Yep. The only thing that I would potentially like to flesh out a little bit more, and I think it was mentioned by some people, would be on number 4, the affordable housing target guidelines. I wonder if it would be good for us to put a number in there to tell the council that, you know, we'd like to see the prioritization be at $300,000 or less, or $350,000 or less, or something, so that they kind of know what, from all the discussions that we've had and the reports that we've looked at, what seems to be most important to the community.
I think, Jim, that there are, Roger Nattercall was here at one of our early meetings, and I think that the affordable housing and workforce housing have numbers, government-established numbers, and I think the affordable is 300 to 350,000 or 325,000, something like that. I would hate to put a number in there and have it be a wrong number, but use the term affordable housing or workforce housing and rely on that data to get in there right. You know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. When those numbers, though, when they say 325 or 350, that's the cost, and it does not include the lot. So that's the builder's cost without a lot. So by the time you add a lot and builder's markup, we could be talking a $450,000 or $500,000 house. So that's the concern I have, just using those. That does not include, it's not a number that I think is reflective of what I think the need is in the community. It's not a real number. Yeah, it's not a real number.
Once again, just for the record, where I talked about earlier with my daughters purchasing a house and selling one, in the 300s, under 300, under 400, there really does seem to be, at both the true low-end affordable housing, the bottom of that range, through probably 350 up 370. I think there's a shortage in both of those areas because that first-time buyer then has to go someplace else. What hurts sometimes is when you get that $250,000 house, as your family grows and you outgrow that house, you don't live in that long enough to build up equity to move into the next step. You move into a $350,000 or $375,000, you usually live there long enough, you're going to have some equity built up than if you were to advance maybe to a forever home or whatever. That helps. As far as saying what the city should or shouldn't do, I definitely think there should be an emphasis or a priority on projects that come in that meet that the affordable side, under 400. If you could do, we talked about that Vitality, or not really Vitality Village, but we talked about a project that Steve Nordhughes had approached, where potentially you could do some stuff maybe very affordably, and that would really be appealing if that were a possibility. But I think that's reflected later on in the summary.
And maybe a compromise would be just to add another bullet under that supporting concepts. It says an emphasis on houses that would sell for $350,000 or less.
I'm asking Roger, if he's awake, we'll let
Okay.
him answer, hopefully.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, both would do.
I would like to add, last year, March 31st, at a city council retreat, which I attended, this is an example. I hope Rita is involved in this also. A community project funding. It just opened up yesterday. And I got a call from Mike Flood's office this afternoon. And the lady I talked to that called me, she said there is somebody from Norfolk, she didn't know who it was, that was involved in it's a grant application. And anyway, back to March last year, the Airport Authority Board came to that meeting and they wanted money from the city to help build a new terminal and hangar. At that time, they were denied money, but anyway, they filled out a grant application through the community project funding, and last year they did get $3.23 million to build a new terminal building and a hangar. Now, fast forward to last week when Roger and I and the mayor were at a funding campaign for Mike Flood downtown Norfolk here. Mike Flood did talk about this community project funding. But the window on that, this lady told me today, closes March 9th. But Mike Flood told us last Wednesday night that the city can apply for this grant. And he said essentially, it could knock $20,000 to $25,000 off a brand new house, because the city could use that funding for infrastructure and whatever they needed. And it's my hope, I don't know who's writing that grant for the city. To me, it doesn't matter, but what does matter is that if Norfolk does get some of that money, it's used in the right way for affordable housing, because that is what we need.
The summary of this, though, does, I think, represent most of what we had discussed. It takes ideas from everyone. Again, the exception of not having the assessor deal. And then I think one thing that maybe isn't reflected as much as it should be probably is, I think when a TIF project is used for affordable housing, not workforce housing or whatever, but for affordable housing, there should be deed restrictions to make that owner occupied through the TIF bond. And the reason for that, even last night in the State of the Union, that was spoke of, that a lot of large companies come in sometimes and sweep up inventory that is affordable, and that drives up that for potential buyers. And I think that's probably an important part on trying to make sure that, because a developer could come in and not use the term affordable housing or not use TIF and do whatever they want to do. But when that process is used, those houses, in my opinion, should be owner occupied through the term of the TIF bond. Pay the TIF bond off and then do what you want with the house. I don't know if the group would oppose adding that kind of language to the guidelines. But I think what we're trying to do is frame something here that would be palatable, where we would kind of turn in something based off this as a guideline or recommendation. So
I think that could be another bullet point in item 4, or somewhere in there. But yeah, I think, here's Roger's, here's the question I asked Roger. So Roger, does affordable housing price definition, and I put 335,000, include lot and construction markup? His response was the current construction cost relative to rural workforce housing fund is at 325,000. That's the construction cost only, includes contractor markup, but not the cost of the lot. So the lot price does not sound like it's in there, but the cost of construction, including the contractor's markup, would be in that 325,000.
Okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I would want to double check that, because I did read those statutes at one point in time, and I thought it was different,
Yeah.
but we'll maybe just double.
And there again, it goes to that definite, is rural workforce housing, or is it affordable housing, or middle-income housing, whatever, there's all those definitions in there.
Yeah,
So,
that's where I just thought a
but I think a
dollar.
bullet point of a number is,
Yeah,
for our purposes, is fine.
And we could frame this as a recommendation or a priority be giving to those type of projects. The other projects would need to stand on their own merit, and council will decide what council will decide, but the priority, I mean, getting what we need worst is, and obviously you build a $300,000 house, there's probably not as much profit in it for the builder as there is building a $600,000 house, so it may need de-emphasis, but.
I think we just have to be mindful of right now, this is what we need, but in 10 years, this could be a total shift to a different community need. So I think we have to also be mindful and careful not to say this is what it needs to be and frame it as a forever and ever kind of thing, because it needs to be a document that changes as the community changes. I mean, in 10 years, maybe we need, our biggest priority is industry or commercial. And if we're stuck on affordable, then we miss the boat again. So I think that's where, having the council look at what the community priority is every 5 years or so and adjusting the policy accordingly makes sense.
I agree with that 100%. And maybe that's something we should have in here, that a suggestion that this be reviewed by the council on a 2-year basis or something like that?
I just wrote down a couple ideas according to that, and I wrote it under number 2 in our guidelines. But policy to include language similar to this in some fashion, priority given to projects that have been identified in the most recent study, and whatever that study is, to have a study priority list created at least every 5 years.
This policy really is more regarded just housing as a whole. I agree with what you said. The summary of the housing study, even though there are some questions on it, the summary that Jim had, and I agree when I read it, I think everyone else would too, is the affordable side is really what needs the most help. It could be written that based on the housing study, on the housing study's interpretation of affordable housing or something like that, because there'll be a future housing study and that benchmark may move, those numbers may move, but it would be a good idea to at least look at that and factor that.
I saw where you could put your bullet point on the, at number 8 is where I think you would add the deed restrictions. Where you're setting the phase of deadlines on total project completion deadlines, prevent projects from stretching, and then maybe add the deed restrictions language of some sort in there.
On the last page of this outline, under B, we have a balanced development versus taxpayer impact. And I think that was one of the purposes here to suggest to the city council to look at this balance of, we do need development, but we also want to look at what the taxpayer impact is of it. And I understand there is a formula that has been used to come up with some of this idea of if we're balancing these two areas. Is that correct?
I'm not aware that there's any real formula that does that right now.
I had somebody tell me there was a formula, so I didn't know.
A percentage of.
Well, there's a method that they look at a project and use some numbers and make some allocations and come up with some suggestions. Does it make sense or not? But somebody should be doing that.
There's an ROI, but it's, it's based upon what the developer says his costs are and what he wants to have for return, but it doesn't really balance that against the taxpayer impact.
Maybe, Rod, what you're thinking about is what the developer works with Randy on for the TIF proposal? I'm not
Okay,
sure
but-
if that's what you're referring to, but.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. There ought to be some way that we can, in black and white, at least put out some allocations of does this make sense?
Randy, what is the city's current debt with that? Round number.
I'm thinking it's around 50 million, but
50 million?
I could be off on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we could come up with some sort of suggestion that would recommend to the city council that only a certain percentage of the city's total valuation can be used for TIF projects without, therefore not putting a heavy burden on taxpayers and your grandkids and my grandkids.
I don't know that we have the enough information in front of us to decide what that amount is. Everybody would do that, but ask the city to evaluate what they feel is a healthy amount, and then there's a target or a guideline then that they could do. I mean, you could look at comparisons with other communities and things. We did in prep, Jim and I had, I think it was the guy, Tim Keelan had brought up that some communities use a certain percentage, but he kind of pulled numbers out of his head. It didn't necessarily make sense. I don't know where we are on that or anything. These guys probably do. The city does probably know where we are. But yeah, I mean, if you keep a good balance, pretty good thing.
Well, I just wonder if someplace in our magical country, there is a manual of some sort created by some wonderful government agency that gives recommendations for something like that. I'm sure that Bob Wade isn't the only one who's thought of that.
We do look at our percentage of TIF to our assessed value and chart that and put that out. And we're kind of right in the middle of the pack when you look at that.
And
Just-
about 5%?
Yeah, I believe that's about right. We take, the state puts out a report every year, and you can look at the assessed values that you have compared to the assessed values for the other cities, look at the amount of TIF debt that's outstanding for each one of those cities, and chart that, and we do that, and we're not on the high end, we're not on the low end, we're in the middle.
Randy, that's total assessed for all properties, commercial, residential?
Yes.
Okay.
Non-residential projects have a completely different ROI dynamic, industry, things like that. I mean, those really are, on an individual basis, you have to really look at those individually because they can be so unique that and the payoffs are so different, and there's so many more revenue streams than just property tax and stuff like that. I really would hate to see our group even make a recommendation of that. That really needs to be looked at on an ROI basis on an individualized item process. However, it should fit under that guideline of exposure that you're talking about.
What is the next step? If we think this pretty much summarizes our collective feelings,
Troy and I talked about that a little bit, and I think there's some desire amongst the committee members to wrap this up and be done. And so, we thought if we bring this up and we talk about new ideas or adjustments to it, that maybe we put together another version with the updates we've talked about tonight, and we bring it back at the next meeting, and if everybody's okay, we just say, these are the ideas that we came up with to the council, and turn it over to them.
Just as it is, almost. You know, minus the transcript support, which isn't necessary, it's necessary for us. But if we did that, it's a bit more, it's not a full, necessarily a recommendation. It's more of an outline on the information that we felt like, not collectively necessarily, but all the great ideas that came out of the group. And it's up to them to take that and build something out of it.
would it be up to you two guys to present it to the council? Or do you think you would just give them the material? I think we need somebody explaining it to them or giving our opinion.
That's a great point. It's a good point. And we can certainly do that, or we could do it as a group.
Maybe we could all meet at a meeting, and if somebody objects or thinks something different, you can say so. Or we could have Steve do it.
No, I think as a committee would be very good. Because then they realize, we all had input into this. This is what we believe, and this is what we are suggesting.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Anyone on this group would you all support that as the plan? Using this as the baseline, adding the new material, the new information we did. Basically, the next meeting could be fairly short. We'd get this to you guys ahead of time, and we just vote, not item by item, but this is a summary of the ideas that the group has put together, and we submit that to the council for review, and it's another set of eyes. Anyone that would oppose doing that with this plan?
I would not oppose it, but I would ask if we could have the draft sent out in a few days. And I don't remember if our bylaws allow us to do electronic voting. If it would, I would offer that we could do it electronically, rather than have to have another meeting. Or call a special meeting ahead of a month later. Again, try to get this thing wrapped up sooner than later.
Yeah, I think we're probably doing a special meeting versus electronic, right, Kylie?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do it electronic.
Okay.
So do we set that date of that meeting now or do we,
2 weeks too soon?
I think 2 weeks would be fine. I can't do it in 1 week, but I have another meeting next Wednesday.
Oh, she's got to advertise.
Yeah, so I need time to advertise, but 2 weeks is not out of the realm.
Would that be the 11th? March 11th?
March 11th at 5:30, just like we have in this same building, and we'll just convene and if it could be a real short meeting if we all agree and.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's the plan then.
That's the best plan we've come up with.
Okay, we'll open this up to public comment at the end of the meeting here. If anybody has anything from the public, you're welcome to step forward and state your name and tell us your thoughts. If not, okay. It's a long line of people, so we'll go ahead and close this off. Everyone have a good night, and thank you very much for your efforts on this so far.